Well, hello again. Let me do some housekeeping here. Just give me a second, okay? Because I had some trouble getting the thing started. Um, Give me a second. Is live. Okay, there we go. And let's see whether I got any messages of what happened to the streaming. No, no. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. I'm live. Yes, I'm sorry about that. I had a last minute emergency that came up, and then for some reason I couldn't get the stream started. But here we go. Here we go. Here we go. And first off, it's funny the things that you find. Oh no, I forgot to introduce the show. Yes, good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grayson. This is the KMG show for Wednesday, April the 6th, 2022. Yes, it's interesting the things that you find when you go down a rabbit hole on the internet. So, at National News Watch, they have an essay today by someone called Christina Clark Kazak called Why Lowering the Voting Age in Canada is Such a Good Idea. And Christina Clark Kazak is an associate professor at the University of Ottawa. I should mention that National News Watch, the conversation, it's all sort of quasi NGO. National News Watch is the Canadian equivalent of Drudge, but it is solidly left wing, even more so than Drudge these days. And as I say, sort of quasi NGO, quasi governmental. Let's see. Three initiatives aimed at lowering the voting age in Canadian federal elections are reigniting conversations about youth enfranchisement. A group of young people is suing the federal government, claiming that disenfranchisement of those under 18 is unconstitutional. That is absolutely fatuous. Any age chosen for voting rights is arbitrary. It's going to have to be arbitrary. It used to be 21 in Canada in 1970. It was lowered to 18. The United States did a similar thing at the same time, or the same thing at a similar time. I'll mention one big difference between 50 years ago and today. 50 years ago, there was a significant number of people who were 18, who were 18, 19, 20, who were actually working for a living. Not very many today. That is one of the most significant events in one's life is first job that one gets, the first full-time job. And then you get your paycheck and you're very, very excited. And you open up your paycheck and you look at the amount of money there and you go, what? I'm supposed to be earning X amount per month, which works out to, half X per half a month. And the question that people who open the check for the first time ask is, what happened to my money? How come there's so little of it? Well, tax, pensions, and such like. And that's just a binary divide between people who have to face that and people who do not have to face that. But let's go back to the article here. NDP MP Taylor Backrack has introduced a private member's bill to lower the voting age to 16. A similar act to amend the voting age is currently at second reading in the Senate. This is the 11th attempt to lower Canada's voting age since it was changed, lowered to 18 in 1970. Some municipal and provincial jurisdictions in Canada have considered lowering their voting age. So have other countries, including the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. 13 countries already have voting ages under 18. In Canada, the federal NDP and Green Party publicly support a younger voting age. The federal Conservative NDP and Liberal parties already allow members as young as 14 to vote in leadership contests. So there are four main arguments for lowering the voting age. Youth most affected by today's pressing issues. No, they are not. Again, Uh, how many 16-year-olds are working full time? How many 18-year-olds? How many 20-year-olds working full time? Not very many. So they are not most affected by today's pressing issues because they don't bear any responsibility. Number two, could fuel political engagement, lowering the age to a time when young people are enrolled in high school civics classes. Yay, civics! Could increase formal political participation and strengthen democracy. Despite the political consciousness and engagement of children and young people, there is still widespread apathy and declining participation among young adult voters. Oh, so here's how it goes. So those who are still in high school and those who are in community college and university, um, who haven't worked, they take their brainwashed minds to the polls and they vote for the Green Party. That's how this is supposed to work. Number three would align with other age minimums. Oh, the current voting age does not align with the minimum age of many other activities that require maturity and judgment, such as driving, consensual sex, and paid work. Most tellingly, the age of criminal responsibility in Canada is 12 under the Youth Criminal Justice Act. We're talking about positives versus negatives here. Being punished for a crime that one has committed, yeah, that's negative as opposed to voting, which as positive. If children can work and pay taxes, oh, a lot of 12-year-olds working and paying taxes. Again, a lot of 16-year-olds working and paying taxes, 18, 19, 20. Nope. Actually, it's generally conceded and has been for centuries that the age of responsibility for one's actions kicks in at around 7. So, should 7-year-olds be allowed to vote because they are considered to be responsible for their actions? And number four would eradicate assumptions. Ageist assumptions against those under 18 mirror historically sexist and racist arguments to disenfranchise women and Indigenous people. Um, it's a completely circular argument would eradicate ageist assumptions. So what? You have to be 16 to be able to drive a car. That's an ageist assumption, isn't it? Why don't we lower that to 12 or to 7? But I just mentioned this in passing. Oh, many Canadian adults also lack basic civic literacy. Yeah, adult voters are not necessarily more informed about policy issues than young people. Uh, yes, that's nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Again, because those people who are working and paying taxes have a responsibility that those who are not do not. And even how many 20-year-olds today, 21-year-olds even today could find the Ukraine on a map, know how many people live in Canada, know how many people live in their city. Uh, how many of them know anything about anything besides what they see on social media? No, they don't, actually. But the word has gone out that the voting age must be lowered to 16 because this will mean more progressive candidates being elected. So I wanted to know more about this woman, Christina Clark Kazak. So I went to her Twitter page where she is described as a University of Ottawa associate professor, migration and age rights, IASFM, past president, I don't know what that means, parent, former tall ship sailor, pronouns she, her, L, white settler on unceded Algonquin land. Then why don't you bugger off? Hmm? If you are stealing from the Indians, which you seem to believe, then leave. Why don't you go back to where your people came from? So I was scrolling down her tweets, and yeah, this woman is exactly what you might expect. She liked and responded to a tweet from someone called Sarah J. Martin. who wrote two primary issues. One, after 2+ years of a pandemic, there is grief and loss that is erased with calls to go back to normal. This has to be acknowledged. Our job is to build connections to the students where they are now. This means change and not back to normal. No, it doesn't. What is the purpose of teachers? Well, I suppose, first, to give children basic skills, the 3 R's, as they used to be called. They don't do that anymore. They failed in that. Second, the purpose of teachers is to give young people the tools that they need to think. They don't do that either. They failed at their basic job. What they believe now that their job is, teachers, is to tell young people how to feel and how they should change the world. And here's how they should change the world. Teachers teaching used to be a rather simple job, modest, one might say. Now they believe that they are the engineer of human souls. Oh, apparently April 4th, I learned from Christina Clark-Kazak, was Refugee Rights Day in Canada. But then I found a link to a woman called Selam Debs, she, her, owner of Juicy Yoga, anti-racism and anti-oppression educator, racial justice advocate, holistic life coach, singer, songwriter, inspirational speaker, mother. Yeah, so many of these people never mention a husband. And then I found out that from her that the anti-racism course with Selam Debs is now open for registration. 6 modules, 45 video lessons rooted in the Canadian context, that's in scare quotes, 6 PDF workbooks, and 8 live coaching sessions. I'll talk about more about that in a minute. On April she retweeted on March the 31st, Thursday, March the 31st, is International Transgender Day of Visibility. TDOV was created to raise visibility of and to listen to and uplift voices and experiences of transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary people. There was a joke when I was a child. You may have heard it yourselves. It would be Father's Day, or more typically Mother's Day, and children would say, how come there's a Father's Day and there's a Mother's Day, but there's not a Children's Day? And the response would come back, every day is Children's Day. So the alphabet people need their day of visibility. Every day is their day of visibility and audibility because they never shut up. But on April the 5th, Selam Debs, she, her, tweeted, when you are learning about the racism and inequities and harm that Black, Indigenous, and racialized people have faced, again, who racialized them? You were not learning about Black, Indigenous, and racialized people's history. You were learning about white history and the white colonial agenda. Well, for better or worse, Canada is entirely a European, i.e. colonial foundation, entirely. And the civilization that this woman takes for granted, she just wants to smash it and replace it with rent seeking. So what do we know about Selam Debs, she, her? Well, she has her own website where she has the braids, the long braids. It's not good for the scalp, we have learned. Ask Jada Pinkett Smith. And she is making the Black Power salute. She describes herself thus: I am a Black Ethiopian queer anti-racism education. Yes, a Black Ethiopian queer. How did that person end up in Canada? And for what reason, I wonder? She is also an anti-oppression coach, a social justice advocate, a student in dismantling anti-Black racism, an accomplice in dismantling anti-Indigenous racism. Accomplice is generally not considered to be a good term, pejorative normally. Also in dismantling xenophobia, Islamophobia, and an advocate in intersectional and alphabet people rights. To my Black and brown sisters and brothers, daughters and sons, and non binary family, I dedicate my work to you. I created my anti racism course with one purpose in mind: to create an equitable world for us, for our families. Again, equal has been replaced with equitable, and they do not mean the same things. I live and breathe the hope of community where we are seen, heard, savored, nourished, and uplifted. To my white allies and, here we go again, accomplices, I honor your willingness and readiness to unlearn, unravel, and dismantle systems of privilege from which you benefit, but which leave so many of us disenfranchised and fighting to thrive. I created my anti racism course for you to relearn the histories of our Black, Indigenous, and communities of color that were erased from our education systems. I'm grateful to be walking on this journey with you. Well, as I pointed out many, many times, in 1971, there were 34,400 Black people in the whole of Canada, which at the time had 22 million people. There was no Black history in Canada to speak of until fairly recently. Erased from our education systems? No, that's pretty much all that children learn in school, besides, how to be an alphabet person and how to change one's gender. I am the founder of Juicy Yoga, a yoga and meditation instructor, a restorative yoga teacher, trainer, a holistic life coach, a Reiki master, and a Lululemon ambassador. I'm first and foremost a mother. I'm a singer and a songwriter, a poet, and a practitioner of self-acceptance, self-love, and radical compassion. My anti-racism work is rooted in the understanding that we must acknowledge and identify the insidiousness of white supremacy before we can dismantle colonial belief systems. Yes, again, it's absurd to talk about white supremacy in Canada, seeing as white people are officially discriminated against in our laws, and that this discrimination is explicitly protected in our visibly named Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Section 15.2, to be specific. Also, why would a white supremacist society allow itself to be replaced by non-white people? The process of undoing, unlearning, and re-educating is necessary for white communities to embark on, says who? To support the healing journey for our racialized families, including people like Sella Debs, she, her, who were not even born here. My personal yoga and meditation practice is deeply connected to my experience that racism and daily oppression tears apart Black bodies and imparts havoc on our nervous systems. We carry these fear responses through generations and without healing, pass our systems of high alert survival through our DNA. While racism may seem like theory and concepts for white folks, spelled Folx, because of course it experienced in the bodies of Black people in a deeply ingrained way. I am, she writes, a Black queer Ethiopian woman, pronouns she, her, raised on stolen lands traditionally known as Turtle Island. No, they were not known as Turtle Island. Who was born in Amman, Jordan, and grew up in the projects of Regent Park and Scarborough. Yes, the mean streets of Scarborough, Ontario. Why was this Ethiopian woman born in Amman, Jordan? Was her father perhaps in the diplomatic corps? She continues, I am the mother of a teen boy. I believe in eradicating inequality through raising compassionate boys into men. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be that teen boy. I am always exploring ways to allow my son, allow my son to stay connected to his wholeness, kindness, inner and emotional intelligence. I am deeply committed to advocating for the rights of BIPOC. I'm sure you know what that means. Inclusivity and social justice also for BIR, Black, Indigenous, and racialized alphabet people folks. I am a survivor of abuse. Of course she is. A believer in the idea that healing and thriving is our birthright, that therapy, coaching, and storytelling are paths to healing. She further goes on to, As an Ethiopian black queer woman raising a black boy, again, that poor boy, none of us are free until all of us are free. That is stupid. How could anyone believe that? Some people are freer than others. We acknowledge that we live and work on the traditional territory of the something, something, and something peoples. Then go back home. Go back home. Who wanted you here? What do you add to this country? And here's the best part. As black people whose African ancestors were enslaved and whose blood was shed to build this nation. Okay. Ethiopia, or Abyssinia, as it used to be called, was the only part of Africa, and maybe there are tiny little exceptions, that was not colonized by the Europeans. The Italians suffered a humiliating loss in, what was it, 1890, 1891, and eventually Mussolini succeeded in conquering Abyssinia, but that didn't last long. It lasted less than a decade, actually. Black people enslaved. Well, if there was any slavery in Ethiopia, it wasn't done by white people. It would be done by Arabs. And black blood was not shed to build Canada because Canada was fully built before there were any black people to speak of in my country. But this is the kind of people that we bring here. Okay. Rent seekers, people who hate this country with a passion, but have discovered that there is a lot of money to be made in hating Canada. And guess what? The federal government, provincial governments, municipal governments across Canada will pay rent seekers like Salam Debs, she, her, considerable amounts of money to embolden BIPOC people in the belief that somehow they built this country, which they did not, and to humiliate white people. Meet the new boss, Salam Debs. She, her, is one of Canada's new bosses. No one decided, no one elected her to be a boss, but the NGOs who run our country have decided that that's what white people are going to get because they deserve it. Not the white people who actually still run things in Canada. They're the good white people. And when the revolution comes, they will be spared, or so they think. Let's go to the chat. And again, I apologize for the late start. Hello to David the Gnome, Contracoup, Picasso 88, Dan. Buddy says, Kevin, youth baseball season is about to start, so I'll be taking my listening to the ballpark, if that's okay. Of course it is. Hello to Professor Jonathan Paul, Kapropajavaitye. Buddy, Kevin, please rate Katie Pavlich on the scale. There are so many of these blonde conservathoughts. I get them mixed up, but let me look her up here. Did she go to Hillsdale College? Did she go to Hillsdale? I know one of them did. Let me take a look at her here. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I published rules for how to be a conservathought some years ago. Step 1, go blonde. Step 2, go blonder. And she has followed my first 2 rules. I've come across her pieces over the years. They're essentially worthless, and she's not very attractive. So yeah, okay. Rate her on what kind of scale? But there we go. There's some thoughts. Hello to Anron, Chokin 666. I think I explained what happened. I ended up creating a duplicate stream, and it took me some time to figure out what I'd done and then how to change that. Anron says, Kevin has always been the caretaker. Kubrick reference. Always like that. Hello to Halper. Thank you for your kind words. Dan says, Jugmeat wants all those TikToks aimed at teens to pay off. Voting age should be raised to 30, says Palcasso 88. Mark Butterworth says, heard any good slap jokes lately? Didn't you send me a bunch about Will Smith last week? No. Again, when the voting age was 21, there were a lot of people who had been working for years, quite a few years before they had the right to vote. But given the increasing lack of responsibility among young people, and it's not fair to blame them entirely for this. Yes, you have to go to college. Why do I have to go to college or community college? Why? Why do I have to do that? How is it going to benefit me? Is it going to make me a more intelligent, knowledgeable person? Not bloody likely. Here's a big difference between university a few decades ago and the way that it is now. There was little in the way of student loans, so people would have to have rich parents, or their parents would have to take out loans, or the students would have to work. Now, if students work, it means their studies might suffer. It also means that there's not really going to be much of a social life there. And as I've seen, let's say with members of my own family, they get these loans from the government, and the loans are sufficient for them to live the lifestyle that they could have led if they actually had jobs. Expensive cell phone plans, all the rest of it, going out, partying, drinking, all that kind of stuff. But they're borrowing the money, and then they get a nasty surprise, of course, when they leave college or university, that their qualifications are practically useless for getting a high-paid job. You get these high-paying jobs typically by being part of the oligarchy. And second, they have these tremendous debts, which are going to take them typically years or decades to pay off. Who else do we have here? Buddy says, my cable provider just dumped OAN. Professor Paul says, no voting, restore absolute monarchy everywhere. Dan says, box wine and cats, I'm sure. Contra Q says, the only path out of this mess that doesn't lead to a totalitarian state is dramatically restrict the franchise. The push to expand it is telling. If I find out what juicy yoga is, I will wish I hadn't. Well, a few years ago when hot yoga became popular, not that I've ever done yoga, it's part of an alien religious system from the Orient. I thought that this was metaphorical, right? Hot as in sexy. And then I discovered no, it literally means hot, that you're doing yoga in an overheated room. And I thought, okay. Racialized, caramelized. Jonathan Paul says, Ethiopian queers, does Emperor Haile Selassie approve? Haile Selassie visited Jamaica in the 1970s, where he appeared to a hero's welcome, a royal welcome, a deranged welcome. And I believe that when it was explained to Haile Selassie what Rastafarianism was, he was completely bemused, because, of course, it makes no sense. Anna says, anti-oppression coach, username available. Hello to Dawn from Beyond. And RJ67, she wants to start a conversation. No, whenever, again, you know this, right? We need to have a conversation. What that means is you're going to yell at me, and I'm going to sit still quietly and listen and go, That's what the conversation means. Hello to No Sleep Till Breezewood, Pennsylvania. Of course, Juicy Yoga, it's not spelled correctly. It's spelled Juici, and the two I's give it extra power. And just scrolling down here, hello to Don Willis. John S. has agreed on yoga. Just stretch like a normal person. Okay, so what am I going to talk about next? I am going to talk about. This was interesting. This is from remix.news. France's former intelligence chief warns against possible civil war due to mass immigration. And this is by Olivier Bolt. France and Europe must abandon mass immigration and radically change their immigration policies, warned Pierre Brochand, who served as director of the French DGSC from 2002 to 2008 during an interview published in one of France's most influential newspapers, Le Figaro. All multicultural societies are doomed to more or less deep rifts, explains Brochard. In such a situation, it happens that minorities are violent winners and majorities placid losers. During his career, Brochant was also a French ambassador, notably in Hungary and Israel. That's a pretty high ranking diplomatic post in France to be ambassador to Israel. His interview in Le Figaro was published March 24th in the context of new conflagration in the French ethnic suburbs, particularly in Paris and Lyon. For the past 2 weeks, the city of Sèvres and Aulnay-sous-Bois in the suburbs of Paris have been the scenes of true urban guerrilla warfare, and similar scenes have been seen in Villeurbanne and Nissieux in the suburbs of Lyon. Each time, it is incidents between police officers trying to enforce the law and violent multi-recidivist criminals that were the initial cause of riots, shootings, and arson, as well as ambushes set up against the police squads called in as reinforcements. Brochant said that it's increasingly difficult to prevent the French from seeing what they see, and also because a breakthrough personality has suddenly appeared in the formulaic world of politics that has encouraged them to open their eyes. Brochant is referring to Eric Zemmour, who has succeeded in placing immigration at the heart of the current electoral campaign, even if he does not seem to benefit from himself, with the latest polls placing but only about 10% of voting intentions, far behind Marine Le Pen, who is at about 20%. I wonder about that. Marine Le Pen and her party is, well, it's a family party, isn't it? It's just run by Le Pens, and they've got another Le Pen waiting in the wings. She attacked Eric Zemmour as being far right, which is pretty droll. Yeah, I'm not like that bad guy Zemmour. Brochant insists, I hold it the type of immigration which we have been experiencing for half a century to be an event out of category without precedent in our history. And quite honestly, I confess that I do not understand how free and enlightened minds can still underestimate its seriousness. Indeed, we see the same thing in Britain. We see the same thing in Canada. We see the same thing, in the United States, actually. And the question, what Peter Brimmel calls the national question, can these nations survive? That's become a serious question. I mean, we hear this term American. What does it mean to be American? Is Rashida Tlaib an American? Only in the sense that she holds American citizenship. As far as I can see, she's not an American. Are these other members of the squad, like Ayanna Pressley, who has alopecia, is she an American? Does she regard herself as American? I don't believe she does. She regards herself as Black. Now, of course, Black people have been Americans for a long time, but there is such a division. There's such a difference between the elite now and others, that the elite has abandoned America. And these immigrants to my country from India, Pakistan, Somalia, Haiti, Jamaica, etc., China, of course, are they Canadian? I don't think so. Not in any reasonable sense, certainly not in any traditional sense. I had an interesting discussion on Twitter the other day that someone was railing, someone named Crime Hater Scott. He was railing against piracy. That the fact that there's no more hit rock albums anymore was because of piracy. And I got into it with him, and I disagreed with him for several reasons. That the huge change in the record industry, which has led to the situation where we are today, it began before Napster, or it was contemporaneous with Napster, not related. Do you remember Napster? Where you could go online and you could get really crummy MP3s of hit songs. Later, it became possible for people to download whole albums. But the studies I've seen indicate that the vast majority of Americans do not know how to pirate things. And piracy, I don't think is a problem in the music industry. It's certainly a problem with regard to movies and, say, HBO shows and the like. Why is it not a problem for music? Why would people go to the why would they pirate music when you can get it for free on YouTube and for practically free on Spotify? These people, they don't care about music quality. Now, let's say in the 50s, 60s, and 70s and beyond, you had this, high fidelity or stereo culture in which people, would boast about, well, men typically would boast about the quality and the power of their components and, the beauty of the sound. Well, if people are listening to MP3s on earbuds, they don't care about sound. That's one of the reasons why popular music is not important anymore. Why it doesn't drive the culture. It hasn't driven the culture for decades. I suppose the last decade, which could be said that popular music drove the culture, was the 1990s. The grunge movement was one example of that. But what happened well, some background here. Of course, the record industry exists to make money. Now, it used to be that there were record companies. I mean, Warner Brothers is a famous example of this, and in Britain, say, Island Records, where there was an idea that we are purveyors of quality. Sure, we like to make money. Who doesn't like to make money? But we're not going to just put out anything because it makes money. And these companies and others, they would allow singers, bands to build an audience. No, your first record doesn't have to be a smash. You're going to build a reputation. You'll get good reviews. You'll benefit by word of mouth, and we'll let you make a few records. And Jennifer Lawrence, before she became a big hit, I believe she was on Warner Brothers, and she made something like 3 albums, one of which was produced by John Cale, of all people, who was a Warner Brothers staff producer. And they didn't sell very well, and Warner Brothers said, well, sorry, we're going to have to let you go. And then she went to another label, and she became very successful. Well, the record industry doesn't work that way anymore. Also used to be the case that bands or singers would typically make 2 albums a year. Sometimes they made more than 2 albums a year. Now, some of these records are going to be hits. Some of them are going to be flops. Some of them are going to be in the middle. So long as the record company made a profit, they were happy with that. But the sequencing of albums, or whatever you want to call them now, I know album is an old man word, is important. Because if you're putting out an album every 6 months or so, well, you don't expect it to be stupendous, do you? Now, typically acts take years between releasing records, and it reaches ridiculous situations like that of U2. Oh, we're going to have to delay our album because things have happened in the world. Yeah, things are always happening in the world. Do you really think that a YouTube album in this decade or even in the previous decade is going to be world shaking. No, but that's the way that these people think. When records used to be put out relatively quickly, even if bands were spending a lot of time in the studio, there wasn't the ability for the record companies to direct this like a military campaign. But that's what they have moved to. The day the music died, I'm thinking of this band in Sync, and I believe it was in 2001. I could have the date wrong here. They put out a CD, which I believe sold 2 million copies in a week. 2 million copies in a week. Now you can get into, top 10 or top 5 sellers selling, 30, 40,000 in a week. So how did this happen? If you go to the RIAA website and look at very famous records, from the 1960s, you'll find that how high did these, how many did they sell? Well, platinum records, no, gold. That's what they wanted, gold records, which means like 500,000 copies. 1 million records? Who was going to sell 1 million records? Well, after the record industry changed its model, diamond was what they were looking for. And diamond means sales, American sales, of at least 10 million copies. And there's a list of bands, and I'm not talking about greatest hits records or whatever, but there's a list of bands who have, put up diamond records. Nevermind by Nirvana was kind of an exception. That went diamond, but, that was at the crest of a wave there. A record which goes diamond is, there's two kinds of record buyers, to the extent that anyone buys records anymore. Very few people buy physical media. But let's go back. Let's go back 10, 15 years. That you have a person, say, who's not all that interested in music, but might buy a half a dozen CDs or bought a half a dozen CDs in a year, or maybe just one or two or three. If you can get those people to buy your product, then you are going to get a diamond record. And you can see where this is going. That the record industry decided that they were going to aggressively pursue the lowest common denominator, and with very deleterious effects. I've told this story before. It's still true. If you happen to pass by construction sites and you hear people, outdoors or inside playing their, music on boom boxes or whatever, do they still exist? You're liable to hear bands like AC/DC and Led Zeppelin and the Doobie Brothers and Steve Miller and the Eagles. These bands are 50 years old. Why would people still be listening to music that was 50 years old? When I was young, no one was listening to Bing Crosby and Rudy Valley. No, that would have been ridiculous. Well, one of the reasons is that, again, circa 2000, the record industry decided that it was not interested in, how will I put this, straight white adult males. Why not? Because it's harder to sell to them, to women, particularly pubescent or prepubescent women and gays. Much, much harder to sell to them. Again, in the record industry, you'd have smashes, you'd have flops, you'd have ones in the middle. And of course, the record industry loved smashes. I mean, who doesn't? But the meat and potatoes of the record industry was in catalog sales. And of course, in a certain way, it still is, because it's a secret that record industry doesn't like to talk about, is that typically new releases are outsold by so-called catalog releases. Catalog release is a release that has fallen off the charts but keeps selling. And people are buying these old records because they find nothing interesting in what is happening. But there's a certain type of record buyer, a collector, and these are almost always men who would find something that they liked, some singer or some band, and they think, oh, well, I'll buy another one. Then I'll buy another one. Or maybe I'll decide that I want to buy all of them. The CD, the success of the CD, one of the most important reasons for this was not, increasing quality. That was one reason, or durability. They were important. But that the people like me decided, oh, I'm going to have to rebuy everything that I'd bought on LP on this new medium. And the record industry just made bank for years and years and years. And then that sort of dribbled away. But there was something else that was. I just mentioned these bands, NSYNC, New Kids on the Block, other boy bands. Britney Spears is a perfect example of this. Britney Spears was pre-sold. How did she become so big so quickly? Because her record company spent a fortune preceding her, giving away cassette tapes and all this sort of stuff, enormous amounts of promotion. So she arrived pre-sold as a star. The fact that Britney Spears has very little musical talent and there's little evidence that she could ever sing is important. And let's look at today. Dua Lipa and Doja Cat. Do you think that anyone cares about the music of these people? I'm not picking on them because they're women. There are plenty other male examples. It's branding. It's all branding is what it is. You buy a certain type of music, and this establishes you as a certain type of person. Now, they all do ads. In the old days, singers and bands would endorse equipment. So they'd get, free guitars, free amps, that sort of thing. But the idea of them endorsing perfumes or all the rest of this stuff, no, 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 no. You'd lose all your, street cred if you did that. If, Katy Perry, to give one example, would be famous even if no one knew that she was in the music business. Oh, because, she's with this man, and she's not with that man anymore. She's with a different man. And here's a bunch of pictures of her with, her clothes falling off. And, she's having a baby now. All that sort of stuff. All of the drama in the gossip columns. The success of people in the music business, now there are exceptions, is overwhelmingly extra musical or even non-musical. Now, I believe it was in 1999, Clive Davis, who had formerly been a longtime head of Columbia Records, and he got fired for corruption, and then he ended up at Arista. And he decided to crack the code. Now, the music industry has always looked to crack the code. You don't want to put out records that are going to fail. You might, we're very proud of this record, but you want it to sell, right? And so what you've seen in the past is the music industry following trends. Let's see, Elvis impersonators, all sorts of them, all of the bobbies in the early 60s, and then the British Invasion, the garage bands, psychedelic bands, singer-songwriters, heavy metal, I could go on. But the music industry was surprised by trends, by what became popular. I mean, the story is told about Nirvana's Nevermind, that the record company, Geffen, they thought, well, this is going to sell as well as a Sonic Youth record, right? Maybe 250,000 copies. And they were absolutely dumbstruck by the success of Nevermind. In 1997, when Radiohead's OK Computer came out, because the Bends had been quite successful, and they thought, well, the band is going to build on this. This will be like the Bends, only better. And when they heard OK Computer, they were unhappy, to put it mildly. And they radically downgraded their estimates of how many copies this would sell. Now, they ended up being pleasantly surprised, but I'm trying to think of an example since, say, OK Computer. I mean, a record company would never allow a record like that to be released anymore. I mean, in those circumstances. Okay, the Bends was successful. Make another record like the Bends. Now, radio had changed even more radically after OK Computer, and I remember talking to a well-known interviewing a well-known American writer about music, and his name was Ira Robbins, very clever fellow, and he said that people seem to be angry with the Radiohead records that came after OK Computer because it was as if you know they were a company and they made widgets, and they said, no, we're not making widgets anymore. We're doing something else. No, you can't do that. You're in the business of making widgets. I mean, it used to be understood that okay, band would make a record and then they would change their sound, and some bands were constantly changing their sound. David Bowie became famous or infamous for this, but that's not allowed anymore. Now, OK Computer came out in 1997, and I believe it was 1999. Clive Davis was responsible for this Santana record called Supernatural. Supernatural. Now, Santana, the band, had been around since the 60s, and they became very popular in the early 1970s. And Clive Davis decided that he was going to create a template, that he was going to leave nothing to chance. That, oh, you think that Santana's music means this? No, well, actually, it means everything. 13 different producers on this record. Everything but the kitchen sink in the tracks. And let's bring in all these famous people to guest on it. So there will be something for everything. And every song on the record is going to be a potential hit single. Again, record companies like the idea that every song on a record could be a potential hit single. But, how do you know what's going to be a hit single? But this template was created, and it's been beaten like a rented mule since then. If you look at high-profile records that come out, whether from singers, from bands, from hip-hop rap artists, they all have at least 10 producers. Some of them have 20. Some of them have 30. And that's not counting all the mixers that they use. And dozens of people writing songs, bringing in all of these songwriters, for their tracks. What they are doing is cannibalizing hit sounds from 6 months earlier. People ask the question, why does everything sound the same? Why does it sound so bland? This is by design. You see, they have found the philosopher's stone as they see it. So why would they mess with it? Now, occasionally, even today, a record will come out of left field and become a hit, and then they might just say, "No, we're going to imitate that instead." I'm looking at a band like LCD Sound System, which came out in the 2000s and was doing something different. I mean, James Murphy knows music, popular music, inside out. All the different genres, and to a large extent, his music is a kind of a pastiche of these different genres, and nothing wrong with that. But the enormous success of LCD Sound System, it threw the industry for a loop. Why should this weirdo hipster band become successful? Well, it did. Now, again, radio played a part in this. The songs all have to hit you like a hammer right from the very beginning, or someone might, change the station, and you don't want that. You see the same thing in streaming services as well, which led to the so-called loudness wars, where records were mastered at an insanely high decibel level because peaks and valleys. Everyone loves peaks and valleys. No, we love the peaks. We don't love the valleys. The valleys bore people. They turn people off. Well, if you've got nothing but peaks, it just becomes dull. It becomes completely dull. But to wrap this up, I could talk about this for a long time. I don't think that piracy rather, is not really a problem for the record industry anymore. You look at the model now where, oh, you got to sign up to Spotify. Oh, that means that millions, tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of people will be listening to your tracks. How much money do we get from it? Surprisingly little, insultingly little is what they get. And of course, if you're, the stories. Some band has thousands of plays or tens of thousands of plays, and they get a royalty check for, $1.07, that sort of thing. That's not sustainable. So I guess if you're in a band now, you better become one of the biggest bands in the world, because it was always difficult getting by in a band, but now it is harder than ever, particularly since record companies are demanding 360-degree deals. Oh, yeah, apparently you're making money off touring, so we're going to take some of that money. Why? What have you done to deserve this? You don't even promote our records anymore. Record companies used to promote records, all sorts of records, not just the toppermost or the poppermost. But of course, there used to be these things called record magazines. There also used to be these things called record stores. And these were ecosystems that nurtured rock bands. Let's see, there was Rolling Stone, and there was Cream, and there was Circus, and Trouser Press, and Hit Parader, and New York Rocker, Crawdaddy, and others, right? In England, they had the New Musical Express, which in the 1970s was selling over 200,000 copies an issue. Cream was selling over 200,000 copies an issue in the 1970s. Well, they're all gone now, or they've gone online, and they're a pale shadow of what they used to be. People used to be excited buying these magazines, but the excitement has gone out of it now, because again, the music doesn't drive the culture anymore. But there is something else that has gone on, that has happened, that is far more important than any of the things that I have mentioned. Interactivity. Texting and video games are interactive. Music isn't. Music demands that people listen, which is considered dangerously anti-democratic today. Stop what you're doing and listen. Yeah, I know there's dance music, of course, but again, if it was simply a question of the beat, you could just play click tracks. You don't need anything on top of it. That's one of the reasons why music has become oral wallpaper. And again, if you've got the earbuds on, you're walking the street and you're looking down at your phone, you're not paying attention to the music. There's a surfeit of music. It becomes boring. Again, not that long ago, if people love music, one of the reasons that they like to get home from their jobs is because they could spin their LPs or play their CDs. If you are inundated with music all the time, why would anyone get excited about it? Well, of course, one sees a similar thing with the way that movies are treated now, as opposed to the way they used to be. That simply the industry has gone for scale. Small films, studios don't make small films anymore. Oh, just going back to what I was saying. Look, why do people have earbuds in their ears and they're staring down at their phones when they're walking the street? Well, I guess they're trying to shout out, keep out the rest of the world, a desperate desire to keep out the rest of the world, or even an understanding of the environment that they're in. They're in the virtual environment of the music and whatever's on their smartphone. That's the world they live in now. They don't live in the outside world anymore, unless conspicuous consumption is involved. Camping, hiking, river rafting, the kind of stuff that you need to buy expensive accoutrements to take part in. Movie studios used to make a lot of movies, lots and lots and lots, and they don't anymore. They make very, very few films. Again, similar to the record industry, movies make a lot of movies. Some of them are going to be smashes, and some of the smashes are going to be a surprise. Now, Gone with the Wind, which for decades and by some metrics is the most popular or successful movie ever made, when it came out in 1939, no one was surprised that it was such a hit because the novel had been such a sensation, and because the movie, was expected to speak to the South, which it did in a tremendous way. But so the movie industry, like the record industry and like the publishing industry, went for scale. John Borman has written about Deliverance, which was an out of nowhere smash in 1972, starring a bunch of actors no one had heard of, with a very strange subject matter. And he's explained that how did this work? Well, he had kind of a track record. Well, not much of a track record. He made Catch Us If You Can, the Dave Clark 5 movie, and he did Point Blank, which is a big cult film. Lee Marvin had absolute refusal over everything to do with that movie because he was such a big star, and he handed that to John Borman. And the executive said, yeah, what is this movie about? It doesn't make any sense. And Lee Marvin says, this is the way my friend John Borman wants to make it, so that's the way it's going to be made. So he explains how Deliverance was made. A script, come up with a script. You bring it to Warner Brothers, who Borman was with for many, many years. Okay, we're going to give you the budget. Okay, if you can bring the movie in within this budget, that's fine. Nope. Now he says you're going to get hundreds of notes about the script. No, we don't like this. We don't like that. No, it needs to be more broadly acceptable in all these different ways. And the stars. Oh, like if you can't get this person for the movie, then it's going to go into development hell. Or we'll commission a new script. We'll fire the director, come up with a new director and a whole new cast. That's with studio movies now. With independent movies, which Borman has made several of, the biggest part of it is securing the funding, which means you have to look for tax shelters and you have to grovel to rich people. And someone says, I want an executive producer credit because I put so much money in, and maybe I want to make my suggestions about the movie. It's agonizing struggle, almost a Sisyphean, to make an independent film with any kind of a budget. So, what do we ended up with in both popular music and in movies? Popular music, movies even, Pearl Chow. The studios are not interested in any project which is not engineered to make at least $1 billion. At least. And there are movies which have made over $1 billion, which are considered to be failures. That's how enamored of scale popular arts have become. Again, the same in the publishing industry. Oh, we love your books. The critics love your books. Well, just wait. You'll build up an audience and then you'll break through. No, they're not interested in that. They're looking for books which sell enormous amounts and from writers straight out of the gate. So, good luck with the idea of, as I say, building up an audience and, word of mouth, that sort of thing. It doesn't exist anymore. Our culture has become stupider. There are lots of reasons for that, some of which I mentioned. Demographics is another reason why. The old Hollywood moguls were thought to be, crude, stupid men from Eastern Europe, and many of them were crude. And of course, they like to make money, because who doesn't like to make money? But all of them thought that they had a responsibility to the public, not to just churn out endless trash. and they felt, they felt embarrassed if people thought that, people thought that they were schlockmeisters. Why do you think there are so many, adaptations of famous books and the like? Because they like to think that they were in the artistic world as well. Nobody cares about that. Nobody cares about that at all. In fact, you're believed to be a sucker if you, have those kind of considerations. Oh, people say, well, what about Merchant Ivory? Say, yeah, Merchant Ivory became a brand. Oh, I'm a sophisticated person. I'm a serious person because I watch Merchant Ivory films. But the age of Merchant Ivory is that's finished too. Shakespeare in Love. Does anyone care about Shakespeare anymore? That movie didn't come out all that long ago, but that's like the last vestiges of a movie culture where, yeah, I know who Shakespeare was. I'm not an idiot. You know, I know who Anne Boleyn was. Nah, that's all gone now. Let's go to the chat. Uh, Respectable commenting name says, how much avarice is enough? They don't even really pay for these either. They have an entire practice of shady bookkeeping named after them. Yes, Hollywood accounting. Yeah, that was revealed to the public in the Art Bookwall trial. This Eddie Murphy vehicle coming to America was a big hit, and it was demonstrated in court that the movie had been stolen from the columnist Art Bookwall. And then the studio, it could have been Paramount, said, yeah, okay, you won. What are you going to do about it? What do you mean? What are you going to do about it? This movie made a fortune, and I'm entitled to a significant slice of it. Well, yeah, sure, in theory, but the movie didn't make any profit. What are you talking about? The movie didn't make any profit. Well, they set up these shell companies, where every expense is dumped on this shell company. This is the company that made the movie, and it is deeply in the red. Well, where did all the money go? Well, that went somewhere else. That's not the movie. It's something else. It's been speculated for years that the whole hip hop industry is simply money laundering. And suggestions have been made about Hollywood as well, that it is increasingly money laundering. Let's see. Pacino's Looking for Richard is also a pretty good little film, says Anne Run. Weinstein and Orion, says the Salamander Patient. Yeah, Orion made a lot of arty films. I mean, geez, look back to the 1990s. It wasn't all that long ago. And look at the kind of movies that were produced then. Or look at how many movies that would stand out that were made in the 90s compared to movies that are made today. There are very few movies made after the year 2000 that are memorable. I mean, yeah, remember that great scene in that movie? Or remember those lines? Remember when people used to, quote lines from films? You don't hear very much about that. Yeah, well, in the Avengers film, well, which Avengers film? How many of them are there? When that planet got destroyed or that solar system got destroyed? And remember how sad it was when they all got killed by some monster? But they weren't really killed, were they? Well, no, not actually. So how sad could it be? How sad can the death of any of these people, of any of these superheroes be when you know that they're not really dead? Do you know that James Bond was killed off in the latest movie? What? James Bond? No, you can't kill off James Bond. Yeah, but he's not really dead. Again, how is the audience supposed to be sad when they know that it's not a real death? Watched Falling Down last night. A great film, says Emma Nimpton. I forget who it was who was talking about this on Twitter, saying that he had rewatched Falling Down for the first time in some time, and that he was surprised that he'd forgotten just how horrible Michael Douglas's wife was in that movie. Yeah, and she is horrible. And she's played by Barbara Hershey, who, I don't know, is always given off a sort of nasty vibe, or at least it seems to me. Yeah. But again, of course, most movies are not good, and most movies have never been good. But The point is that you would like some movies. I don't know. When I see these lists of, the top 10 or the top 20 or even more movies in a year, really? Where are you finding these movies? How many of these movies even got a theatrical release? Again, this division into niche culture. Oh, well, yeah, you can find a lot of great stuff on Netflix. Can you? I suppose there are great things on Netflix and there are great things on Amazon Prime. But they churn out so much. And of course, there used to be these things called film critics. And again, that was kind of an ecosystem, right? Well, first it was thumbs up, thumbs down. Now it's all, this is the movie you should watch because everyone is talking about it. Oh, look at the fabulous stars. And did you hear the rumors about the discord on the set? That sort of thing. Okay. What else do we have here? Oh, Ginger Baker also had a screw loose, says Anrun. I saw the documentary about him. He lived in Africa in a compound. What was it called? Beware of Mr. Baker. Very strange and rather unpleasant man. He was a registered heroin addict in England in the 1960s. Who else do we have? Jonathan Paul says, buy my book, The Years of Great Silence. Okay. Can you send me a link to it, Professor Paul, and I'll plug it? Dancing Band says, other than music, cigarettes was another great pleasure. I quit 2 years ago after 25. The smell of another smoke still evokes a pleasant high. I don't know. I have women, sometimes I hear from women, that, oh, I'm quitting smoking. I'm finally quitting smoking. And I tell them, do you know you're going to gain at least 10 pounds in the next year? They're rather taken aback by this, but it's true. It's true. Jokin666 says, I don't really get Depeche Mode. I like them from the beginning, very beginning, when Vince Clarke was in the band and he left after the first album. And then Martin Gore took over, and I liked that too. And then they became this really gloomy band, this gloomy electropop band. And the gloomier they got, the more successful they became, much like The Cure. Strange thing. I went to see Radiohead in Vancouver in the late 1990s. And then I saw Depeche Mode a few weeks later, and Radiohead was playing the Pacific Coliseum, which is a hockey arena. And so was Depeche Mode. And the crowd at the Radiohead concert, they all looked like they were going to go to graduate school. Whereas the crowd at the Depeche Mode concert, despite their gloomy songs, was mostly Chinese, and it was like, party! Yeah, as I say, the same thing happened to The Cure. David Wright says, my music was shaped by early dance music shows like Mel's Rock Pile, where Richard Harris gets hit with a brick. That was pretty funny. KMG Shakespeare is great because he was master of ups and downs, says Dionysus. Indeed, he was. I was talking, I rewatched a movie, Deep End by Jerzy Skolimowski, which I reviewed years ago. I think it was on the old Luke Ford Theater Thursday. And the movie played at a festival in San Francisco. And Skolimowski said that the crowd was really enjoying the film, and it came to the end, and he said he saw the people come, out of the theater into the lobby after it was over, and many of them were angry. And he said in an interview, "How did these people think this movie was going to end? Did they think there was going to be a happy ending to it? I mean, a good film has a logic to it." Right? I mean, Murnau famously faced this problem in his great silent classic, The Last Laugh, where it's this story about this imperious man, this doorman, who suffers a series of reverses, and it just gets sadder and sadder and sadder. And, because it was put to Murnau that, no, maybe back in Germany, that kind of thing will fly. Well, he was in Germany, but looking for international audiences. And so, hey, How about you win the lottery or something like that? And you get to smile and look down at all of the people who made your life a misery. And the title card, says that, yes, this, and now we have our very improbable ending or something like that. Have you ever seen Dua Lipa music video called Break My Heart? No, I have not. Okay. I love these broad brush truisms, says David the Gnome. That's what I specialize in. Max Vitriol says, in regards to youngsters encountering taxes, there was a short-lived McDonald's ad years ago in which a boy gets his first paycheck. Who's Fika? And who said he could take all my money? That's a good one. I have paid Fika when I worked in San Diego. Doja Cat, says Don Willis. This is where we are. This is what we have become. Kevin is Stevie in Diner, says David Wright. Def Leppard, Bon Jovi were breakthroughs, metal for a female audience. Yeah, they were a different kind of metal, this arena rock, they called it, Def Leppard, they weren't my bag, as we used to say, although I did nothing against them. They're very good at what they do. Their covers album that Def Leppard came out with, outstanding. It's called Yeah. Highest recommendation. Absolutely outstanding. Bon Jovi, I always hated Bon Jovi. Oh, I see. You're an outlaw, are you? How are you an outlaw? RJ67 says, yeah, CCR released 3 albums in 1969, all big sellers, full of hit singles. Yes, poor John Fogerty, who wrote the songs, sang the songs, played lead guitar, and produced the albums. And this wasn't a vanity credit. Yeah, he got put through the ringer by a very, very bad man who owned Fantasy Records and used the money, which he stole from John Fogerty, to produce records like Amadeus. Yeah, Saul Zaentz was his name, one of the greatest crooks in the history of music. Mr. Zaentz, you said that if my records were a success, that they, that I would get more money. Is that done on paper anywhere? Oh, and by the way, you're going to have to just keep churning out these records, because if you stop, I will sue you. And of course, Zaentz actually sued John Fogerty for plagiarizing himself. And the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that legally it is not possible to plagiarize yourselves. Jonathan Pohl says, I made many university students more knowledgeable. Most of them were in Africa, but they learned a lot more European history than they would have otherwise. When I say that teachers are useless, of course, this is a gross hyperbole. But, the transmission of knowledge, I really don't think that it's all that important in universities. Now, when I entered university in 1973, and one of the reasons that I quit in my first year was that I'd been reading a lot of novels, well, particularly, Russian novels. And I thought university is going to be so exciting because it's going to be filled with people like me who are interested in ideas and culture. Well, even at that time, there were 25,000 undergraduates at UBC. And, realistically, how many of those could you expect to be interested in ideas and culture? I suppose I didn't think this through. I really didn't understand the scale of the problem. My Trail of Disgrace, although says the film Wild in the Streets doesn't seem so ridiculous now. No, I suppose it does not. These 60s exploitation films, they're really fascinating genre, Yeah, something is happening, but you don't know what it is, Mr. Jones. And the film studios, a lot of them were, American International, whatever. Well, the kids have gone nuts. And so how about we just make a bunch of films about kids going nuts? We don't know anything about this. So, we'll let Jack Nicholson or whoever, write the script, you know? That was a fascinating time. You get, you get, sometimes you get excellent results, when the people who are in charge don't really know what they're doing. And they say, well, these people, they seem to know what they're doing, so we'll let them get on with it. But, keep in mind, none of these movies that I'm talking about cost very much money to make. If you're spending 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 million dollars, sometimes I'm not even including marketing costs here, then you're going to leave nothing to chance. Oh, Don Willis says next on Old Straight Men Who Know Better. Yeah, the album collector, David Wright, the album collector in Donner, where the classification system that he'd had, and as I recall, it's been a while since I've seen the movie, he was engaged to a very attractive indeed woman, and he's trying to browbeat her, with his classification. And I'm thinking, no, that's for you. Okay. It's not necessary for her to understand this or even to know about it. Okay. And as for, her playing your records, as long as she doesn't leave fingerprints all over them or spill stuff on them, I think that's about as much as you can ask for, really, reasonably, that is. So, what else do we have here? This show's been a little more, how shall I say, unstructured than usual. Let's talk about Hungary. And I think this show is going to be a little shorter at both ends. I apologize for that. I would have started about 50 minutes late, but I think I'm going to end up about 10 minutes earlier because once a week, I leave my hotel room for a social engagement, and today is that day. Jeremy Carl writes in American Greatness, Viktor Orban has crushed the left again. The Hungarian leader won his fourth consecutive term in office Sunday, defying pollsters who had predicted a competitive race and delivering a crushing blow to the so-called United Hungarian Opposition, a dog's breakfast coalition of 6 parties ranging from the Greens to a former far-right party with neo-Nazi associations, that would be Jobbik, which he defeated by a 53 to 35% margin. In total, right-wing parties captured approximately 60% of the vote, compared to about 36 for left-wing parties. For some Americans, it may seem strange that so many on the American right are paying attention to the political developments in a country less than a quarter the size of my home state of Montana and with a population of just 10 million. This confusion, however, betrays a fundamental misunderstanding of the strategic importance of Hungary to the post-liberal right, an importance to which I can personally testify, having recently concluded a 5-week research trip to Hungary in the run-up to the election. Simply put, Orban offers the most prominent example in the world of a conservative politician who has unapologetically and effectively used the state for right-wing ends, something that the American right has been almost wholly ineffective at accomplishing and is often unsure it even wants to try. Well, yes, we don't want, favors for our people. That would be unfair, but they do it. Just because they're doing it doesn't mean that we're going to do it. We're going to stay ideologically pure, as pure as you can be. When the Koch brothers are funding your think tanks to come up with justifications for the 1%, that doesn't sound very pure to me. No, the right, I'm not going to use the conservatives. I hate that word. You know this. Shouldn't call yourself a conservative. It's a dead movement, and it's a wicked movement. Look at David A. French. Oh, all this talk about grooming. Oh, so you whip yourself into a righteous indignation about Donald Trump and his sexual peccadillos, but you cannot be brought to denounce The sexual mutilation of children. That's conservatism for you. They do not understand the crucial importance of the friend-enemy distinction. That's Carl Schmitt. You know, we want to help our friends and we want to hurt our enemies. Oh, but is it fair to hurt people? Well, if you stay out of politics, then you won't have that problem. Jeremy Carl continues. Well, much of the GOP establishment think tanks talk airily of our high principles. The left has run roughshod over us, subjecting traditionalist Americans to indignities that could never even have been imagined by our forefathers. If we are being brutally honest, we could not have imagined these indignities ourselves just 10 or 20 years ago. The right says, not everything is political. The left says everything is political. And we are going to make everything political. We are going to create a world in which you have to take the right side on everything. Like language, say. Oh, well, my favorite actress. Actress? Actress? What do you mean actress? The word is actor. It's unisex. Okay? Why do they still give out Oscars for best actor and best actress? That's not relevant. Of course, it's never relevant, you know? Yes, they have colonized everything. And over the tiniest thing, they will fight a war. They will fight a war over everything. And the conservatives say, well, it appears we lost another one. Not that you fought it in the first place, but we'll be extra vigilant against the next atrocity that comes along. How about the sexual mutilation of children? Let's not get too head up about that, okay? We don't want to be like them. Oh, so you're happy with your own children going through that experience? Oh, I know that's not happening at my school. Oh, really? How do you know that? Are you sitting in on the classes? Are you listening to what the teachers are telling the students? Because many American parents and many Canadian parents have had a very ugly surprise when they find out, say, from their 11-year-old daughter that her name isn't Laura, it's Dan. But what do you, huh? When did this happen? Oh, well, I've been living as a boy for 9 months. Living that way to who? Oh, to school. They all call me by my new name. They all use female pronouns. And then you find out about the hormones, injections, and all the rest of it. And the school kept this secret from us? Well, it's not really for you to decide, what my gender is. I was misgendered at birth. And yes, I say, many such cases. Carl writes, as a result of his success, the left and our left-wing media brands Orban a strongman, a dictator, and an authoritarian, although Hungary regularly conducts free elections and Orban is subject to scathing criticisms in many press outlets freely available in Hungary. The list of the so-called abuses by Orban from the left are amusing because, for the most part, they amount to left-wing frustrations with being unable to achieve the things they have carried out so effectively elsewhere. Yes, public universities in Hungary have turned to the right ideologically, helped by substantial funding from the Hungarian state. Of course, these Hungarian universities are nowhere near as uniformly right-wing as American universities are uniformly left-wing. Ditto with public media, uniformly left-wing here and now heavily right-wing in Hungary. Aggressive state sponsorship of the arts with an emphasis on traditional forms and works has restored ideological balance even in that realm, while leading to an artistic renaissance, much to the fury of the uniformly left-wing international arts establishment. I joked years ago that you could put me in charge of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and I could make some big changes. Because, all the TV shows, all the radio shows, I'm going to have to sign off on them. Every single one. Oh, here's another show about a bunch of newfie homosexuals with their snide unfunniness. Nope, we're not making that. No. Oh, here's a story or sitcom about drama about gender non-conforming Pakistanis. No, no, we're not making that. We are not making that. Um, if you're going to make a drama, it has to be interesting and it has to have a certain broad appeal. And if you're making a comedy, it must be funny. Okay? You know, just, you know, why don't you take a look at, the pitches that I have rejected? And by inference, you can understand what I am looking for. I mean, I really don't think that it would be that hard. Jeremy Carl continues, yet while Hungary celebrates its traditional high and folk cultures, one can easily find plenty of dissident artistic voices and left wing performances in Hungary. During my time there, I saw an avant garde play in the Hungarian National Theatre that was as shocking as anything you would have seen in a New York black box theater. Essentially, what Orban has accomplished is a restoration of balance to Hungarian cultural and intellectual institutions. For a left that is used to unchallenge domination of those commanding heights, any competition or balance feels like disinheritance. Even more infuriating for the left, all of their carefully rehearsed excuses for their defeat, legal and not particularly effective gerrymandering, discarded ballots, a biased media environment, were swept aside by the size of the Fidesz mandate. Indeed, the party even expanded on the two-thirds parliamentary majority it achieved in the 2018 elections. The rout was so substantial that opposition leader Peter Marquise lost by a double-digit percentage among his own constituency. Beyond the general significance of his victory, there were several notable aspects of Orban's win from which the American right could learn. First, it was very broad based, in great contrast with today's GOP, which can rarely play effectively in urban and more affluent areas. Orban lost the capital city of Budapest to the opposition by just 47 to 41.5%. While on a relative basis, urban areas are certainly the stronghold of the left, even here Orban and Fidesz had a major presence. Outside of the capital, the opposition took just 2 of 90 electoral constituencies, both with less than 50%, while Fidesz secured absolute majorities of votes, often overwhelmingly, in almost every other seat. Second, Orban ran and won an explicitly realist foreign policy that refuses to fall prey to the Ukraine mania that has afflicted so many other right wing politicians on the left. Despite the fact that Hungary has welcomed 140,000 Ukrainian refugees, President Vladimir Zelensky has explicitly attacked Orban for failing to go all in with the most aggressive sanctions and military assistance to the Ukrainians. Speaking after his election win, Orban explicitly attacked Zelensky and George Soros and the NGOs. And this is just so very refreshing. A third, Carl writes, Orban represents a victory for the real right over the pseudo right, the latter being the form of the right most often sold to American voters. It is indicative of how often Orban has shaped Hungary's broader political debate that the candidate chosen by the opposition was a so-called independent mayor of a provincial Hungarian city, a self-described Christian conservative father of 7 who describes himself as a frustrated former Fidesz voter. Yet voters rejected him decisively, ultimately seeing him as a puppet of the Hungarian socialists, many former communists, and international forces, including the bureaucrats in Brussels. Fourth, Orban unashamedly focused on delivering for his voters, overwhelmingly Hungary's middle-class families and small-town denizens. Hungary's pro-family policy is almost certainly the most aggressive of any advanced economy in at least half a century, providing continuous benefits for Hungarian families far beyond those even contemplated in the United States. Family has been at the center of Orban's public policy efforts, not just talking a big game about social conservatism, but actually delivering it. Further, a proposed child protection law appeared on the ballot at the same time as the parliamentary election, helping to drive more conservative voters to the polls. This proposed law, which played out almost identically to Florida's parental rights education bill in the United States, caused a firestorm of criticism and threats from Brussels, showing that the right to promote sodomy and transgenderism is more important to many European leaders than the democratic rights of Hungarian voters to protect their children from adult-oriented content. In sum, Orban won overwhelmingly with a campaign and record that was conservative, nationalist, anti-immigration, pro-traditional family, and firmly against military intervention in Ukraine. There is a lesson there for the GOP, should they be inclined to learn it. In his victory speech, Orban thanked domestic and international allies with a seeming awareness that the significance of his future. I like this part. In a celebratory post-elections tweet, Balázs Orban, no relation, the Prime Minister's extremely sharp and thoughtful chief political strategist, tweeted out exuberantly, "God above us all, Hungary before all else." So, is the success of Fidesz in Hungary scalable? That is to say, can it be employed in other countries? Well, I think it could be employed in Czechia, in Slovakia, in Poland, say. Could be employed in France, in Germany, in England, say. Canada, the United States, Australia, I'm really not so sure. Because, again, at the top of the show, what does it mean to be a Canadian? What does it mean to be English or British? What does it mean to be Australian? Nothing and everything. Now, similarly, let's talk about a natalist policy, paying people to have children. Now, of course, Eric Zemmour's plan, the money is going to go to people in the countryside, not the people in the cities. If your country is being inundated by foreigners, third world foreigners, who are reflexively hostile to the country, I don't know that this could work. The so-called Conservative Party in Canada and its far-right, contender Pierre Poilievre has decided, yeah, sure, the great replacement is great, so long as it's legal. Oh, and these foreign professionals, we need to bully the provinces into rubber stamping their credentials from Guinea-Bissau or Fernando Po or whatever, because the market, free market. It's there's too many Canadians still earning a decent living, and we don't want to be thought of as anti-immigrant. Well, Canada is still, depending on how you look at this, 65 to 70% white. That's 2-to-1 advantage, right? But of course, with each year goes by with more than 400,000 permanent legal residents, and up to 600,000 others who are supposed to leave, many of whom never do. Well, the clock is ticking, just as it's ticking in the United States. To make an explicitly, national appeal, as Orban has, or as the the Law and Justice Party, I think it's called in Poland. I don't think that can be made in colonial establishments like Canada, the United States, and Australia. Now, the used to be understood that out of many, one. You see it in Australia, you saw it in Canada, you saw it in the United States, that an American country had been founded, a Canadian country had been founded, an Australian country had been founded. No, in all these countries, no, the foundation was poison from the start. The country is wicked. That I'm from Amman, Jordan, and I'm an Ethiopian, and I'm an angry queer woman, and I'm going to tell you what's what. It's my country now. And you not only need to let me rant and praise my rant, you need to shower me with government money. I previously argued that if any of these right-wing parties get into, and it doesn't, even if they're, conservative, as they call themselves, what they need to do is to zero out the NGOs, cut off all of them. Oh, what about the Lung Association or the Canadian Cancer Society, whatever? No. What do? Are they stopping people from getting cancer? No, they're not. There's no shortage of research money for this. Oh, they're doing advocacy. Anti-smoking advocacy, all kinds of advocacy, and no doubt advocacy about diversity. If what they're doing is so valuable, let them raise money. let them go to business or ordinary people and say, you should send us money because of the valuable work that we're doing. But Orban has gone in a different direction. Yes, we are going to keep the NGOs, or the secondary institutions. We're going to fund them, but we are going to make them ours. He famously chased George Soros's university out of Hungary, and for that alone, a gigantic equestrian statue of him needs to be commissioned and built. And who was the head of that university? Michael Ignatieff. It's the rootless cosmopolite who was leader of the Liberal Party of Canada not that long ago and lost disastrously to Stephen Harper. But no, Orban has decided that we are going to take over these institutions. Oh, it's so difficult to take over the institutions. Well, when you have control of the money, it makes it a lot easier, doesn't it? And if you are willing to use the power of the purse to reward your friends and to hurt your enemies, that is exceedingly powerful. So let's have a final look at the chat here. Star Rover says, Kevin, have you considered reviewing Agent of Influence about the CIA's framing of Canadian diplomat John Watkins and his mysterious death? Is Lester Pearson involved in this? Let me just look. Let me remind myself about this. Yeah, okay. He committed suicide, did he? Or no? Okay. Yeah, there was a professor at the University of Toronto who wrote a book about this case, or the same case. And he told me that the footsteps lead right back to Lester Pearson's DACA. He believed that Pearson was a KGB agent, as do I, as did Ralph de Toledano and Elizabeth Bentley. But yeah, okay, blackmail because of his homosexuality. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know whether I'm going to look into that. Gloria Miller says in his essay on Orson Welles, Gore Vidal asserts that Rosebud. Yeah, I'm not going to repeat that. Gore Vidal, he had some valuable things to say, for instance, about American imperialism. But just everything he has to say about Hollywood is just smut. He's the one who invented this story that Ben-Hur is about a gay relationship that went sour. Yeah. And he repeated it, and there's so many homosexuals in Hollywood and in the media that people seem to believe this is true. Look, this obsession with Rosebud is to misunderstand Citizen Kane. Oh, yeah, it's all explained by Rosebud, which was a sled that he had with a child, which, no, it is not. The whole point of Citizen Kane, and, I don't know how critics cannot understand this, but they're stupid. The whole point of Citizen Kane in the movie is very cleverly constructed to hammer this point home, is that it is impossible to know another person, to truly know another person. That's what Citizen Kane is about. There's also, we see the degradation of Kane throughout the movie, from the earnest young reformer to, he gets a swelled head and he loses control. He throws it all away. And then, I'm going to control the country through the media. And he lives this, absolutely absurd life with an enormous, basement filled with all the treasures of the world. Who was Charles Foster Kane? Well, we don't know. We see a whole bunch of people speaking about him, and we see episodes from his life. Why would a man, like Kane, or any man, desert his quite good wife, and subject his, child, to this misery? And for what this lowly woman, and of course we see her become a very nasty person. We don't really know much of what she was like before Kane came into her life. And then he gets this idea that he's going to make her into an opera singer. Who would do such a thing? Obviously, a self-destructive man, but I mean, the famous scene where he gets up and he starts clapping, and you're all going to clap. Self-destructive, you could say, but again, there's a hollowness at the core, at least a hollowness in the core of what we understand about him, because the movie is this, in the script in the movie, they do not attempt to show you or to tell you this is who Charles Foster Kane was. You're allowed to make up your own mind. Anyway, that's my rant on Citizen Kane. Enron says, when you're a gay hammer, everything looks like a gay nail. Indeed, indeed. Spoiler alert, says Popcasso 88, Dead Poet Society results in massive cringe. When Robin Williams was still alive, I thought, how is this guy still going? Why isn't this scam, ended? And I just, I don't know, this is 5 years before he killed himself. I decided, to type into Google, I hate Robin Williams. And I was stunned by the number of hits there were. Halper says, every Vietnam movie, bad stuff happens. Yeah. Okay. I am going to wrap it up now. Oh, I see David the Gnome says, see, while KMG is fantasizing about filtering left-wing garbage in Canadian media, I doubt a leftist even imagines allowing right-wing person to enter the same building he is in. Yes, that's true. Halper says, spoiler alert, Nicholson dies at the end of The Shining, but he doesn't really die. Yeah, well, of course, there's a lot of ambiguity in that film, isn't there? Which absolutely infuriated Stephen King, because, it's about this. Yeah, well, your book's a dud, okay? It had some interesting ideas in it. Oh, this book is really about alcohol, a writer's alcoholism. Wow, that's a novel topic. An alcoholic writer. Whoa, why hasn't anyone done this before? It's just so boring. Of course, he remade The Shining on TV with predictable results. Ambiguity is very useful in art. Very, very useful. Oscar Tosa, 60 Stream of Consciousness, experimental Jack Nicholson, psychedelic KMG show tonight. Okay, that's it for today. I'll be back on the air on time, I promise, tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Thank you all so much for tuning in and putting up with my technical incompetence today. If you would like to make a donation to the live stream, my PayPal account is linked to kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you are in Canada, donations may be made to the live stream directly via Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.